Hello, everyone. Welcome to Health 180 with Carion Fenn and Rogers TV and podcast. My name is Carion Fenn. Today, I'm joined by the host, Greg Frankson, and speaker Janelle Benjamin from the Black Experience Townhall, giving you an exclusive access into what to expect on June 22nd, 2022 at 6 p.m. Eastern. A Durham Black Network and WMRCC program focuses on the emotional impact, rights and laws, the physical and long-term impact of racism, and moving forward together as a community. We want to help you learn more, so let's learn together. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Carion.
Yes. Hi there, Carion.
Greg, who is Greg Frankson and what do you do?
Well, I'm a writer. I'm a poet. I'm a anti-racism and mental health advocate. And I do a lot of that work through VoiceShare Inc., which I founded and for which I'm the CEO. And the work that we do operates at that connection point between inclusive leadership and effective communication, helping teams and individuals to work together and to create environments that are going to provide inclusivity and results for the folks, both in terms of their profit and their social impact.
Janelle, tell us about yourself.
Equity and inclusion practitioner and consultant myself, a trainer, speaker who helps organizations make their workplaces more diverse, inclusive, and safe for all historically marginalized groups in the workplace. I use both my lived and professional experience to guide workplaces in their endeavors through my company called All Things Equitable. And personally, I'm a first-generation Canadian born to working-class parents who came from Trinidad and Tobago. They believed strongly in education, so I've gone on to University of Toronto and Western Michigan Cooley Law School to complete my Juris Doctorate. And I've worked in human rights and immigrant integration and accessibility organizations, breaking barriers for communities ever since. And of course, experienced my own hardships along the way, but we can talk about that. And I'm also the mother of a 9-year-old boy and a 4-year-old little girl.
Yes. Greg, when I gave you that phone call to ask you if you'd host this event, I couldn't think of anybody else more fitted to do so. But I want to know, why did you agree to, apart from making me happy, but why did you decide to host the Black Experience Townhall?
Well, no, it's very important that Carion Fenn was made happy by the acceptance of that invitation, and I will acknowledge that openly and freely. But more seriously, I decided to take on this particular role for a couple of reasons. The first one is that because I care about these issues a great deal, it forms the heart of my personal drive and passion on these sorts of, to do this kind of work. And secondly, more specifically to the context, I mean, I live and work in Durham region. These issues are of importance, not just to me, but to so many folks who live here in this community. Durham region has a significant Black population, and we all need to be, living together with each other as well as with other members of our community in order to make it a better place. And the understanding and the elevation of the experiences and the lived situations that folks are going through is critical to examine and to take a critical look at and to lift up in order to acknowledge the problems, to celebrate the triumphs and the achievements, and then to think about how do we continue to move forward and how do we move forward in a way that's going to be both effective and also is going to provide folks with those feelings of joy and dignity and the ability to thrive. So that's really why I wanted to be involved.
Yes. Janelle, when I saw your bio after the recommendation, as a person with a disability, which my disability exposed me to one of the worst systemic anti-Black racism in modern day history. So it was really important for me to see that combination with you in regards to your expertise in this area. So I want to ask you as well, why is it important to give your expertise at the Black Experience Townhall?
Thanks for that question, Carion. I would say, just for starters, the Black community is just dealing with a lot right now, right? We're still in a pandemic. that has exposed the inequities in our society, and particularly health inequities. You know, people have been sick, many have lost their jobs, many have lost loved ones. I personally have, lost several family members to COVID-19. And we're also approaching the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. And I think it's important to speak to the community about the things that organizations can and should be doing to contribute to this movement for racial equity. We're on the eve of a mass shooting in Buffalo, New York. And, so we're dealing with a lot of trauma as a community. And I can definitely support the community with some of the best practices within workplaces to deal with and address systemic issues and make those improvements that are truly necessary for our mental health and well-being.
Yes. And I think it's so important too for community members to, when they experience this trauma, because I've had to engage in mental health services to help me cope with what has happened to me. But I think it's important for community members to also know it's okay to reach out for that support. I know sometimes it's hard within the Black community to say, I'm going to get help for mental health. Right?
Most definitely.
So I've had to recognize that, as a human being, I've been traumatized and, my child has been traumatized, and it's important to have the support that you need. Greg, the 2019 General Social Survey says that half of Black individuals in Canada experienced discrimination in the 5 years. I experienced severe discrimination within that 5-year period. Have you experienced discrimination in the past? And if so, how did you cope with it?
Well, I mean, I think I would be remiss to say that, that most of the people that I have associated with throughout the course of my lifetime have experienced this in some way, shape, or form along their journey in Canada, living in Black skin. And so for myself, my specific issues come all the way back to being, trailed by police officers walking home after prom, carrying a bouquet of flowers in a formal suit, walking through an industrial area at 2:30 in the morning. I don't know exactly what I was going to be getting up to at that particular time in that location, in that outfit. But I guess the cops really needed to know what I was doing, all the way up to, situations where I've been let go from positions. One position for being, too bold in speaking up for myself. The other, being, perceived as being, the angry Black person in the room, for the simple choice of just standing up for something which I felt was fundamentally wrong. Mm-hmm. I am one of the people who signed on to this class action lawsuit that's been filed against the federal government mm-hmm. by current and former Black public servants because of the treatment that I received when I was employed at Health Canada. And those are just a few of the examples. I can talk about, my treatment, in the legal system itself, whether we're talking about the civil courts or the family courts or the criminal courts. There's all kinds of things that folks can bring to the fore to talk about, the ways in which they have felt marginalized, in which they've been harmed by individuals and by systems. And I think it's critical to make clear that even when folks think that it's being directed at them by individuals, that there's often a deeper institutional and cultural root to what is happening to them in those moments.
Yes. In 2019, the General Social Survey says, Janelle, 4 in 10 Black individuals experience discrimination based on their race or skin color, about 15 times higher than the proportion among non-Indigenous and non-visible minorities. Since these are laws, I think the rights of Black individuals are taken away so easily without care.
See a lot of racism and discrimination at the individual level in violation of many, many of our laws, right? There are still attitudinal barriers to our full participation in society, and just not everyone is having that awakening that we'd like to see at this time, right? Those systems of oppression are still interlocking to make things harder for us as a people as well. And until our systems are remedied, individual instances of discrimination and harassment will still occur. And until we, address things like, racism head on, those unconscious biases that people have, we're going to still see, incidents like we saw over, a few weeks ago with the mass shootings. You're still going to see police surveilling and racially profiling us to a larger extent. So we have to address both, right? Both our systems as well as the individual attitudinal barriers that are existing in our society. And I think not enough attention is being played at the individual level.
I think one of the reasons why individuals who are actually breaking the law and not and discriminating against other people, the reason why they get away with it, because there's a barrier put up where it's so difficult to file a complaint against them and hold them accountable, right? So it's like, kind of feels like the system protects the system, and I think it's so crucial that we file these complaints and hold these people accountable. And I do share that with you, Greg. I do have a complaint in regards to the inhumane way in which I was treated and my life was put at risk and stuff like that. But I think it's important to hold people accountable for what they're doing, and not to paint the rest of, our community members who are doing the right thing in the same way. Greg, why is it important to not be silenced, and how important is it to stand up for your rights and stand up for the rights of others?
It's super important. If we don't do those things, then things will never be better for those who come after us. I had 2 years ago, and almost 2 years ago now, as Janelle had pointed out, it's been since George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and shortly thereafter, I had an incident that took place with respect to the Whitby Chamber of Commerce, and I stood up and spoke out about what was happening at that particular time. Now the chamber runs an annual Black History Month event and is, engaged in active outreach to members of communities of color. And I can guarantee you 100% that wouldn't be happening unless I had stood up and spoken out. And so that's just one example of where folks are under the misapprehension sometimes that if they are the one person who stands up and speaks out, that nothing will be able to change. But there are numerous examples of where folks who exercise the power of their voice are then able to change and affect and impact and influence things to happen on an individual level, on an interpersonal level, on an institutional level, and even on a cultural level. And so it's really important that people understand that the voices that they own, they can go ahead and own sharing those voices in order to make those kinds of changes possible. You can do that on your own, or, there's also strength in numbers. Seek out allies, seek out those who are willing to support both within and beyond the Black community. And you could be very surprised on the impact that you can have. It won't always be quick and easy. This stuff is it takes a lot of effort and energy. And sometimes we got to protect ourselves and our energy and our souls by not becoming overly engaged in certain things at certain times. But in general, to remain silent is to enable those to continue to carry on these types of actions towards others. And we need to put a stop to it in whatever way we humanly can.
And it's sometimes you don't understand, like when someone discriminates against you because of the color of your skin or your disability, it really rips your soul out of your body. You're watching Health 180 with Carion Fenn and Rogers TV on podcast. My name is Carion Fenn, and we'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m., it's the RTV Quiz. Giovanni Petiti hosts a weekly trivia competition that lets you play from the comfort of your couch. Play along at home and challenge your friends. And don't forget to follow along on social media. Let us know who's top of trivia, and you can find yourself featured on a future episode.
Are you kidding me, folks?
The RTV Quiz, Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. on Rogers TV or at rogerstv.com/RTV Quiz.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Health 180 with Carion Fenn and Rogers TV and podcast. My name is Carion Fenn. We are exploring the Black Experience Townhall with an exclusive access to the host, Greg Frankson, and speaker, Janelle Benjamin. It's a program coming up on June 22nd, 2022. Welcome back, everyone. So one of the exclusive information or details that's going to happen in here, I am going to, for each one of the segments, I am going to be sharing a personal experience that's happened to me. And our professionals like Janelle is going to talk about that area. And Greg is going to do an awesome job with hosting this event and bringing us together as a community. Greg, for many years, we have experienced or watched the Black community impacted by injustice, excessive trauma, abuse of power, and death. With the murder of George Floyd, and you mentioned that the anniversary is coming up soon, people started to take racism we experience more seriously. How did the murder of George Floyd impacted you as a Black man?
Well, I guess the better question from my perspective is, how did the other murders that were also happening around that same time cumulatively affect me as a Black male? I mean, because it wasn't just George Floyd. It was, Ahmaud Arbery. It was, Jacob Blake being shot and paralyzed. There was, in front of his children, there was a lot of stuff that was happening that was very traumatizing. And I look at all of those situations and I'm, I actually ended up writing an article that I posted on my Medium account, just talking about how I am Jacob Blake's son. Me living here in Toronto with my own personal story, being raised, in Scarborough by a mother originally from Jamaica, all of this stuff coming up and whatever. But ultimately, I am Jacob Blake's son. I am that kid sitting in the back seat watching bullets rip through my father's back. All of this stuff is as traumatic to me in certain ways. And it is unbelievably soul crushing to be a Black man watching other Black men being brutalized in this fashion. It is heart-wrenching to be a Black man watching Black women and Black children being harmed in these ways and being powerless to stop it or to have any impact on it. It is terrifying in all of these dimensions and so many more. And it continues to eat at me every day. And the shooting in Buffalo just brought back a lot of those very same kinds of traumatic responses.
Yes, yes. And, I ran into something that's been happening to a lot of Black and minority women at the Oshawa Family Court. And it breaks my heart to hear the women speak about, the impact on what they're going through. Many Black women and minority women have been discriminated against and family impacted. What can you say to those women about how to overcome this crisis? Or can you overcome this crisis? I think in that sense, we just need to continue to hold on to each other and seek out the resources that we need in order to cope and survive. Unfortunately, this world has taught us that resilience is incredibly important for Black people. And we are overly resilient humans as a result of what has happened. But we have to continue to place hope in the fact that through concerted effort in many different areas and theaters, that we as Black people can continue to impact on making the kinds of changes that will impact the way that we live and the circumstances with which we must deal with on a positive basis moving forward. And so we've got to work together. I've got to reach out to Janelle and say, hey, Janelle, what can we do to work together? We've got to continue to be engaged with Durham Black Network and other organizations that are doing this kind of work at the local, national, international levels, because the work is never done, but the work is critical. Yes, yes, and I'm so grateful and honored. I see the support for the cities in town who want to be a part of change. Janelle, I had Human Rights Code, AODA, and Bill C-81 that protected me. But the Human Rights Code says that when a person with disability requests disability accommodation, the test is undue hardship. Now, I have experienced it where I requested disability accommodation, taking the proper process as guided, like organization like the Human Rights Legal Support, Arch Disability Law Center, and those organizations were equipped to help support the community as well as other lawyers. And being someone who's was an advisor to mayor and council and an accessibility advocate, I created the accessibility conference that's coming up in December, and yet I wasn't afforded my legal right to disability accommodation under those laws that I needed as per my doctor as a person with a disability. In the same process, a non-Black individual requested disability accommodation multiple times, and that person was given accommodation without any medical information several times. Why do you think, as a Black woman with a disability, we are discredited, mistreated, or rights are violated wrongfully without care?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying, that I'm sorry that you had these experiences that let you know that you were different, right? Those things should absolutely not happen. And you shouldn't be treated differently precisely because you're Black and a woman or person with a disability, right? The Accessibility Directorate of Ontario is there to support organizations on how to comply with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act and on how to accommodate employees effectively at work. And it's awful when we can see disparities in our treatment. We know instinctively when, something's done for someone else, it's not being done for us. Mm-hmm. And I talk about the ways that Black women are doubly marginalized and oppressed on my YouTube series, Twice as Hard. And it just reminds me of Malcolm X's statement that he once said, that the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman, and the most neglected person in America is the Black woman. And I feel like that quote can be applied to Black women across the Americas. Mm-hmm. Those issues are only compounded when you add other marginalized identities, like having a disability, to our Blackness and our womanhood, and our pain is just definitely not seen as equal in comparison to women of other races. We're dehumanized in many ways, and this behavior is just normalized, right? It shows up daily as we're just going about our lives. People are just not focusing on fairness. They're not asking, what did I do last week or last year to this person who's not racialized that I should absolutely apply in this situation to be even-handed and fair dealing, right? Why is this situation similar or different that I'm encountering? And how do I ensure that I'm making the right decision and not bringing my personal biases into play, right? If people would just take a moment to stop, reflect, and consider their actions, most people want to be fair and just, then they'll be able to make those right decisions.
Yes. Janelle, if a person requests disability accommodation in the Human Rights Code and the AODA, is that company or entity you request disability accommodation from entitled to have you sign over your rights to them so that they can speak directly to your medical doctor and have access to your medical records as a person with a disability?
No, absolutely not, right? You can refuse to get consent for the collection, use, or disclosure of your personal health information under the Personal Health and Information Protection Act at any time, right? Express consent is required, either verbally in writing, to the custodian of that personal health information to disclose it to a person or an organization like your employer or your insurance company that's not a custodian. So you can expressly withhold or refuse to give your consent at your discretion.
Yes. Greg, what's one of the things that you hope to see at the town hall, Greg?
What I'm really hoping to see is folks coming together and having an open and honest conversation about the issues at hand. And I mean, realistically, I think we can't really get to the point of what is needing to be dealt with, of what's needing to be addressed, unless we can create an environment where people feel secure enough to be able to share some of these experiences so that others can learn from them, because they will come to the shocking realization that there's a bunch of other people in their room who can directly identify with the experiences that they are discussing. People are not alone in what they're experiencing. And, and there is strength in those moments of solidarity and a mutual understanding. And so that's what I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to. What I'm also hoping for is that there are other folks in the room who are not Black, who are not living those particular experiences, who do have the opportunity to bear witness and to come into a space of allyship, that we can designate those individuals as allies. And I always tell my white friends and my other friends of color who are not Black, I said, listen, you don't get to call yourself a Black ally. Once we figure out that you're an ally, we'll let you know, but you don't get to tell people that that's what and who you are, and just be careful about that. So we want to see ways that we can pull people together to get those expressions out there, and then think about, okay, well, how do we make the situation better for folks in how they're living and working and playing in their lives?
Yeah. Janelle, you worked as a senior policy advisor at the Accessibility Directorate of Ontario, implementing the Accessibility for Ontario Disability Act 2005, which is the AODA. I often mention that a lot. Developing accessibility standard and breaking barriers for persons with a disability. What was that like?
Honestly, it was so meaningful to be able to guide so many organizations on how to make low-cost improvements to the built environment. How do they provide information accessible in an accessible format? And how do they provide effective customer service, just to name a few of the different standards that I got to deal with. I got to deal with so many people as well with disabilities, and learned firsthand about how valuable it is to consult and collaborate with people with disabilities, right? You learn so much about the things we take for granted as able-bodied individuals. And now I can impart those lessons to the organizations that work with me.
Yes.
So it's great.
Greg, tell us about your book, and why was it important for you to produce it?
Well, the book that you're referring to is called African Anthology: Perspectives of Black Canadian Poets. It's this beautiful red book right here on the bookshelf behind me here. And but the purpose of this book, the purpose of the African Anthology Project in general, is to bring together voices of Black experience from across the country and share what those journeys are like as people who are influencing and impacting culture, but doing so while living in Black skin. And so this book brings together not just the poetry, the creative outlet of the folks in the book, but it also has personal essays and commentaries that are there, so that folks can read the poem, but then also understand the person behind the poem and what brought them to the places that they're in, and share some aspect of their experience so that people can get a better clue of how difficult it can be to make one's way in Canada as a Black person. And so I'm sharing that book and hope to share additional volumes of this book to have people understand the power of Black stories to the broader Canadian narrative, and why they are so central and so important to what makes us all Canadians, and how important it is to acknowledge those truths and to treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve.
Yes. And it's important what you say in regards to the power of the Black voices, right? I know that there are other women who are out there who don't, have the platform that I do. And, former Minister Phillips, who supported me till the day he resigned, he said to me, Carion, if this can happen to you, it can happen to anybody. And I've heard from so many women, and I'm truly sorry for what they have been experiencing. And thank you guys for joining us. You're watching Health 180 with Carion Fenn and Rogers TV and podcast. My name is Carion Fenn. Thank you to Greg and Janelle for joining me. Check them out at the Black Experience Townhall on June 22nd, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. A special thank you to Susie Sher Oshawa, and thank you for joining us. And remember, together we are stronger.